Hello and Happy New Year. Welcome to the first show of the year for Community Forum. My name is Joseph Feaster. I'm the host of the program. And I could think of no better way than to start the new year with such a distinguished public servant here in Norfolk County. No one other than Michael W. Morrissey, our district attorney here in Norfolk County. Before I introduce you to our guest, and I'm sure that many of you in the viewing audience know him very well, hopefully on the civil side of things. Yeah. This is a gentleman who has served in public service for many, many years, having been elected as a state representative back in 1977, served there until 1993, then went on and into the Senate, the state Senate in 1993 until 2011, which was the year in January of 2011 after his predecessor, Keating, went on to become a congressman, has been serving as our district attorney here, and he has had stellar accomplishments here, and I thought it was important to begin the year by bringing him on. So, Mr. District Attorney, welcome.
Yeah, it's great to be here. To be the first guest of the new year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to thank you for that. I was amazed, even as a practicing attorney myself. I don't do much in terms of litigation, but and get around to all of the different counties, but I was just starstruck by the expanse of your district. I mean, I want to do this because it was so interesting to me, just listing from the A's to the W's in the sense of all of the different cities and towns that you represent.
You don't appreciate it until you drive it. I mean, you can see it on a map and it looks pretty big, but I tell people, and I give the brief description is it's Weymouth to Wellesley, and then draw an imaginary line down at Bellingham. And then, of course, you have to throw in Brookline and Cohasset. Now, Cohasset is surrounded by Plymouth County, and Brookline is surrounded by Middlesex and Suffolk County, and neither of them touch Norfolk County, but they're with us. Yeah,
so I think if I do a quick scan of the count, it must be something like 20 to 25 different cities and towns.
28.
Okay.
And about 750,000 people, Quincy being the largest at about 95.
So that's a very, very large area. Want to talk about, and this is for our viewing audience, because they may view the district attorney's office in a very myopic sense. Can you explain what your office does, the different aspects? I know you do a lot by way of community issues and all. So could you elaborate on that?
You would suggest people know it as, we obviously are the primary prosecutor of individuals in Norfolk County who commit crimes. But there's a lot more that goes into it. So I'll start with there's 5 district courts that are spread out geographically. Quincy services that end of the county, so the Quincy, Pantry, Weymouth, Cohasset, Holbrook, and Milton, and kind of at one end. Randolph is there as well, and then you come to Stoughton. Stoughton has this sphere of influence. I think it's the Stoughtons, the Cantons, the Sharons in this area. Then you go to Rentham, and that's the bottom end of the county. A lot of my M's, the Millers, the Medway. So Rentham, the Foxborough Stadium is down there, obviously Franklin. So and Bellingham, I have to save because that's kind of an interesting story. And then Dedham, of course, takes care of the Westwood, Norwood, Needham, sphere, and then Brookline. Brookline has Brookline, which is an interesting place because Brookline has its own court, not attached to Norfolk County, so it's a kind of a fun place to do some work because it's a really, truly a community court where justice in that community may be a little bit different than other parts of Norfolk County, but Bellingham is my favorite. I tell people in Bellingham that one of the jokes was, I think that that when I've met some people say, I will never prosecute you if you live in Bellingham. And the reason is that a number of years ago, people in Bellingham vote for me, but the prosecutions go to Milford, which is actually in Worcester County.
Okay.
Now, someone one time raised their hand and said, well, if I commit a crime in Franklin, I said, oh, well, we don't want to do that.
Right.
So if you live in Bellingham and commit a crime in Norfolk County, I will end up with your case. But prosecution is important, and I have some very talented people who handle prosecutions, and there's about 65 attorneys in the office, about 130 people, 16 to 18 state troopers that do a lot of investigations for us, primarily homicide, unattended deaths, and white collar sexual assault, and we have a whole computer and telephone forensic team. So that's one side of the aisle. Then the rest of the office would be predominantly victim advocates who work with people to get them through the process so they understand what's going on, and then finally a small amount of court administrators, and then the administrative staff is very small. There's David, who you met, my press person. There's a human resource person. There's a kind of a budget person and an accounts receivable person, and Paul Wilder, who actually lives here in town, is my jack of all trades. He does everything from maintenance to file storage, and maintains. He does anything that anybody else doesn't want to do, and keeps us running.
I think it's Paul who I met and spoke with.
You probably have met Paul.
Yes.
Paul keeps me running too at times, and it's not a big administrative staff, and then of course the attorneys are divided into the district court, and then the superior court level, and then the appeals section, affectionately known as my geek squad. And the more cerebral people who actually, many times have had a history of being on law review, and writers, and the real deep thinkers who, as you know, as an attorney, we like to stay out of trouble, and sometimes it's nice to ask someone ahead of time,
right,
if this, then what? And
right,
that's the appeals section. Or if you do make a mistake, then you go to the appeals people hat in hand and said, hey, I got this problem, how are we going to resolve it? So they're pretty valuable to the office. I have a good appeals team.
I'm sure that there are persons out there who are watching this as well, and I'll focus on this now so we can get that out of the way, and that would be fine. If one was looking to, to work with the district attorney's office, I know you mentioned it's about a staff of 130, 65 lawyers, the rest may be made up of state police and others, et cetera. Yeah. If one was looking for employment opportunities with the district attorney's office,
well, the state police are separate, as you know. So that's the state police hiring process. Is a class going on right now. Mm-hmm. You have to get some experience, and you apply to the district attorney's office if you're a state trooper. And then I pay great deference to the selections they make. At the end of the day, it's still my choice. Mm-hmm. The bigger role that people, I pay so poorly as a starting salary for an attorney is $37,500, and we're hoping to get that up in the next 2 or 3 weeks to $45,000, and we're working with the legislature to raise the bar a little for people entry. But the experience that someone gets as an assistant district attorney is almost invaluable. I have someone come to me and said after 4 or 5 years, he said, I have 60 trials under my belt, and so he's someone that either at the time, there are very few professional long-term prosecutors, so I think it's a place where you come for a period of time and generally get some experience. You need a combination of new and old to make the place run right. And I pay great deference to the attorneys. You as a law school graduate know that in your last year of law school you can be what's known as Rule 303 certified. Right. That allows you to become a student prosecutor. So we do take a fair amount of student prosecutors during the summer, and even during the school year. There are some obviously night students that want to come during the day and be a prosecutor. Mm-hmm. And that actually turns out to be like a 3-month interview. And so when I've hired a lot of the 303s, I pay great deference to those people who, they come in, they learn the ropes. People who work with them can say, gee, Joe really got it. He'd be a good hire. Right. And so I have hired numerous 303s over the years, because same as I did in the State House, I used to take student interns in, and if they really worked out well and they were a good find, I mean, what better job interview is there? Victim advocates are a little bit harder. We look for people who sometimes have a background that want to be able to work with people. Some of the social science background is helpful, but not necessary. But if you have the strong desire to do that, those jobs do come up. I tell some of the younger kids it's a great place to come and to get your feet wet. I had one person to leave a few years ago. She had two or 3 years under her belt, and all the work she did with victims, she went for an interview at a Boston hospital as kind of a community liaison between the medical community and the patient.
Sure.
And so when as I said, how did that go? And she said, good. I said, did the job help you? And she said, well, when they ask you what you do, and you tell them what your job is as a victim advocate, and then how, you're dealing with families in crisis sometimes, you're dealing with victims, you're dealing with restraining orders, and very complicated picture that you present. She said, it really actually made it much easier to talk about, even myself and what I did, and so it really helped me move on. So I tell people it's a good place for a building block. If we have a job, I tell people to send a resume to the office, and we keep them on file. And there aren't a lot of jobs, that turn over, but when we keep, we're looking for a pool of people, then we call people in and the interview process and try to weed it out and hire from there. Well, and I do pay great deference, I have to admit. Maybe I'll be a little biased. If you live in the county, I pay some deference to that as well.
Well, in terms of that, that's good to know for those of you out there who might be interested in employment with the district attorney's office. We talked about the prosecutorial side to some extent of what the office does, which is a considerable amount. That's what
people perceive that to be the primary function,
but there is other aspects. I mean, just looking through the types of issues that you have been about, or areas of interest or concern that you have expressed, and as I was rolling through some of them, there was you've mentioned in terms of the victim advocate, there was the senior issues, dealing with seniors, and so that they aren't scammed.
Yeah,
you have
crimes.
some education. I mean, some of your educational programs, the things of animal cruelty. So it's a wide breadth of interest that you have established under your office. Could you talk a little bit about that?
I like to think that prosecution is important, and that's what people perceive to be the number one thing that they know about, but the really prevention and intervention is equally as an important role and part of what we do here in Norfolk County. And if I can not see you in the courtroom, that's even better. And so we do have a couple of people, 2 or 3 people who do outreach and education in our prevention intervention programs. We rely upon, I guess one example here, we have a great relationship with the Stoughton Drug Coalition. That's now Stephanie here in town and the police department, but the coalition has been very active for a number of years. And when I came into office, I saw that there was 7 community coalitions that dealt with substance abuse. And Avon had one, Stoughton had one of the oldest ones, Needham had one, Weymouth had one, and Walpole, I think I'm sure I'm missing somebody. But so we looked at those groups and said, gee, they're doing great work in the community. And so that became some of the model that we grew our own education and prevention activities on the side of drugs on the back of the community coalition. So now we're up to 20 out of 28. And so your coalition here in Stoughton has probably partnered with like a Randolph or a Sharon, who may not have had one initially, who are now kind of growing their own community coalition. And so we've have mentors out there for people, and then we have meetings I think every month with the community coalitions to talk about dealing with substance abuse issues. But as you said, there's a lot of other things. They have the senior scams. They have people talking to seniors about just keeping an eye on their savings and not getting ripped off with the person who comes and wants to put do your driveway over, and they put oil down instead of properly covering the driveway. So there's you get a little bit of that. We deal with a lot of issues in the schools just because we think talking to kids, especially the younger we can get them, the better off we are. But everything from teen dating issues to computer, sexting is an issue. Kids innocently think that they'll take a picture of a body part and send it. That stuff stays out there forever, and technically they may have created child pornography, and now they're disseminating pornography. So it gets to be a little bit touchy. I mean, as far as, we're not looking for people to get records. And then you have the crazy things like Country Fest. We could get 300 or 400 arrests on a weekend out of Foxborough, which is in the jurisdiction, and many of them are for underage drinking. And you being an attorney and can appreciate full well that if a person gets into court and then gets arraigned on a charge, that arraignment stays on their record.
That's right.
And I having kids now and had been through it, I guess you appreciate it from our own experience. And then having kids, you wonder how we didn't strangle them ourselves at times. But I think you gain an appreciation of, hey, everybody makes a mistake. I'm a firm believer in that. And I tell the kids the small mistakes we can deal with, the bigger mistakes have bigger consequences. But we have programs, diversion programs, so that if you were to, quote, make a mistake, we catch you underage drinking at Country Fest. I don't want to arraign you, but I do want you to take a program. We have a 2-hour course on good decision making, and then you may end up with 10 or 12 hours of community service. I know the town of Foxborough is quite generous in rolling out all the school buses that end up getting a complete cleaning and washing by some of the people who want to do that. So there are some alternatives for community diversion as well. So we do try to do that. We try to get people who may be suffering with substance abuse issues into diversion and other programs where they get help and assistance. So it's not always about prosecution. It's I think a lot of it is, and I think I enjoyed the legislature the most. I handled complicated legislation, but I enjoyed constituent services the most. And this is really kind of a little bit of policy, a little bit of law, and you still get to help people.
Well, and I'm glad we had an opportunity to have this conversation, because I would suspect that majority of the viewing audience probably had no clue about the other types of involvement, your engagement in the community, the sensitivity of looking at it from the standpoint of trying to deal with prevention and intervention. I would suspect that a lot of people wouldn't see your office like this. So that's why a program like this is good, because it helps communicate that to the viewing audience that's out there.
There's a recent story in the Patriot Ledger that they had the murder totals for the state and the homicide totals, and I think Norfolk happened to be the lowest this year with 2. And there was a case in Weymouth where an individual ended up stabbing his mother, and the police ended up shooting him. That matter obviously has been resolved. There's an open matter in a case out of Quincy that I can't say too much about, but it was a barroom incident where someone got killed. And so that's the 2 homicides for the year in Norfolk County. But it's not homicides that are killing people in Norfolk County. There are 2 things, and one of it is the age-old message that you and I heard even when we were kids, and that is it's drugs. The opiate epidemic is probably the leading killer of people in the county right now. And secondarily, it's still substance abuse on the roads, that we're losing a person a week in a car accident on the roads of Norfolk County. And so that's just the most serious car accidents. There's plenty of accidents, and plenty of them that I'm sure are related to substance abuse, but 1 person a week, and about 60% of those accidents deal with drug and alcohol use. So we're losing people on the roads, and with the ability of people to get pain medication and opiates and the cheap price of heroin, that when Bill Keating left office, he had said to me, gee, I've lost 40 people this year in Norfolk County. And that was 5 years ago. He said, this looks like it's going to be a real problem, and it's coming your way. You got to pay some attention to it. And he was absolutely right, because shortly after that we went to 50 people in 2013. Now the state police respond if there was an overdose death, or what we refer to as an unattended death in the town of Stoughton. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you get a neighbor calling up and said, gee, I haven't seen Johnny in a while, and call the police, and the police and fire show up, and they find that someone is deceased. The local police have to call the state police, and the 2 of them investigate the scene, and they determine whether or not it's homicide or accident. And that's one of the key functions of the district attorney's office. It's actually where I have my primary jurisdiction in homicide. So other matters I don't have primary jurisdiction, but only in the case of a homicide. So they work together, and they come up with an assessment of what that is. And so I get an email usually in 3 or 4 hours after someone has gone out to a scene as to an assessment of what has been made. We had a suicide, I think, this last night, that one of the troopers, there's a young guy that grew up here in Stoughton. I have 2 Stoughton guys, actually, that are state troopers. They're both Marines, by the way, okay. who work in the district attorney's office. One still lives in town, and one lives in Hanover. I won't embarrass them, but they grew up in Stoughton. So they had to go out to one of the communities and determine that it was a suicide. And so those call-outs that we see, there's a high number of them that relate to both depression, the suicides, I think, are drug and alcohol related, but overdose deaths. So 2013 we went to 64, 2014 63, 62 in 2013, 94 in 2014, and then we just had the numbers in for 2015, and we're at 144.
Well, let me ask you, this has been an issue, and on a personal side, very much interested in, in mental illness, mental health, substance abuse issues, and do a lot in that particular area presently. But I know that you have been on the forefront of that, and in terms of establishing, you mentioned about the community coalitions, et cetera. Can you talk a little bit about, I know, what you are doing around the whole opiate epidemic, the issues of mental health, dealing with the mental health courts. Can you talk about that a little bit?
It's funny you should say that. We're the only county, I think, in the Commonwealth, and we have specialty courts. In some places they have gun courts, some places, we have housing and juvenile courts. We have, we don't have, quote, a housing court, but we have a housing session. We do have a juvenile court. But here in Norfolk County, we have three important, what I refer to as specialty courts that are run out of the existing district courthouses. We have a drug court, we have a veterans court, and we have a mental health court. And so, obviously, not everybody is going to get before those courts, but those courts are set up with a model where it's kind of everybody's rowing together. And that is, so you have the defense on one side, the prosecutors on the other, and you have a caring judge who kind of is I would tell you, the moderator of sorts, and so if the defense and the prosecutors are working together to get a person the help they need, sending them to jail is not always the answer.
Right.
Getting people, in the case of, someone on a drug case or a veteran having problems with substance abuse. So you have to have a whole network of support network to help these people. And so a veteran in trouble, I thought, we'd find a lot of Iraqi and Afghanistan veterans, but we're still dealing with the Vietnam veterans, high percentage of them, and people with problems, substance abuse problems. So getting them clean and sober, getting them housing, getting them counseling, the veteran services, and resume writing skills. All those things come together, whatever their need is, identifying the people you need to put together for the package to help this person get back and become a productive member of society. And at the helm, and the person who runs the show is the judge, of course, and Judge Mary Hogan Sullivan in Dedham runs the veteran court. She has a son in the service, I think a captain in the Army, and so she fully understands the military side of things. She's now running all the specialty courts. But I used to tell people when she was, and she comes back and runs a veterans court, in some cases it might be easier just to go do your time in the House of Correction than to deal with Judge Hogan Sullivan, because they're bringing you in on a regular basis, and
That's right.
And she's engaging in conversation. Say, Joe, well, did you go see the council, and how's your housing coming? And so there's a lot of people who I think have to all row together to make this work, and we've had some successes. And then the trick obviously is to keep people from coming back into the courts and making sure we can get them back up on their feet and keep that safety net in place to help them. So,
well, I had the opportunity to visit the mental health court in Plymouth, courts in Plymouth, and in the one in West Roxbury, and it just was it was outstanding. I mean, just as you said, it's everybody working together, including many of the defendants are part of like the family because of the way the judge in those courts were doing it. They would keep everybody engaged and involved, and that person would know what that person's situation were and what's helping them. So it becomes a little community.
Well, if you can't solve the problem, or try to help them on a path that's going to solve the problem, then the likelihood of you seeing them again is high. And so if we don't try to try some non-traditional and different things, that may keep the person coming back into the court system and being court involved. That's not serving any of us well. You got to break that cycle and get them back to a point where they feel good about themselves and get them back into, being productive members. Now, the mental health challenges, people who commit some of the crimes involving mental health challenges, present some unique pictures that, that they don't fully grasp what they're doing. So, but there still have to be some sort of penalty and/or involvement to keep an eye on them and to work with them to make sure that we're doing the right thing by them and the victims of crime. So
I always like to give an opportunity, because from my own personal observation, but also by the observations of my guests, because the work that you do, and I call it God's work. But the issue is, again, to do all of these things, you need resources, you need the type of support. And I know for a fact, because I pay attention to the political issues that are going on, that we haven't uniformly received the type of funding to support the types of community-based activities that you're talking about on the prevention side. Is that still the case? Has it gotten any better, or is there more that's needed?
I think drugs would be the one to talk about. I think we're coming leaps and bounds, but I think we're still lagging behind, particularly in treatment, and especially where the treatment involves heroin or opiates, is getting insurers to pay more. The legislature's been working on. I know that Louis Kafka and Billy Galvin in this area have been doing a really good job trying to put more on the back of insurers. Most of us do have insurance. The problem, one of my colleagues in the western part of the state used to say that the treatment program is kind of like spin dry, like a revolving door, in one door and out the other. And when someone is addicted to heroin or has an opiate-related problem, the length of time that you need to treat someone the tail has to be much longer.
That's right.
And the supervision and the help has to go longer. It's a lifelong battle for many of these people. And it doesn't take much even for them to fall off the wagon and end up back in trouble. So we're creating more beds and doing more things to be able to help people. But like everything else, it's still an expensive proposition. And there's a lot of moving parts. I mean, the medical community has to do more. They have to be more careful about, we have 5% of the world's population and we use 80% of the pain medication in this world.
Yeah.
I mean, what's wrong with that picture? Or as my wife would say, we're a bunch of wimps, and if men had to have children, there wouldn't be any in this world. So you just have to, some of that you have to work with them, and work with some of the support groups like Learn to Cope, which has been a great community partner. And so we're doing. I guess one time you said to me, "What's the kind of low side, the downside?" I said, "Well, the high side is, at least I go to bed every night knowing that the people who work for me, and I know my own actions, that we're trying to do right by people and improve their quality of life." I do get discouraged when I see as much time and effort. We do more work than any county, in my opinion, in the Commonwealth, dealing with people who have substance abuse problems. I mean, Stoughton was one of the leaders in getting people trained in the use of Narcan. They saw the success in Quincy, and Paul Chastity and the members of the police department kind of stood up and said, "Hey, it's working in Quincy." And then when we tried to get them into the state pilot program, the state was reluctant to do that. Well, they didn't wait. They said, "The hell with it, we're going to train ourselves." And they did, and they got trained, and then Norwood followed, and then we got Paul, and we have Dan Muse, who's a Canton resident, emergency medical director at Brockton Hospital. We had a countywide training for every single police and fire department, which they all have now. And I did a talk last night at the Quincy School Committee with Pat Glynn, who's nationally recognized for his work with the Quincy Police Department, has truly been a leader. And we're trying to get the schools now to have school nurses to have Narcan or naloxone. People, just so that they understand the difference, Narcan and naloxone are the same thing. Narcan is the name that DuPont gave to the drug naloxone. So when people say it, they use it interchangeably. But here in this community, you've been a leader too, and most helpful. But our numbers are still going up. They've gone up almost 50%. We went from 63 to 94, and from 94 to 144. And those numbers are actually low. And the reason that they're low is there are people who end up at Good Sam or Brockton Hospital that may live in this community that the police or my office don't know about. They may die, and they're not unattended. They're dying, attended by the medical community. So that wouldn't make our radar screen. So I think our numbers are low. And it's now become probably the single largest killer of young people in the country. So we have to, I think we have to still do more, and we have to get more segments of society. It's not to remove the stigma, it's a disease. Then I usually say, if I were to ask you, and I'm sure you know that, and not to embarrass anybody, I walk into a group of people and say, okay, how many know someone who has had a bout of cancer or died of cancer? And so everybody raised their hand. My mother died of cancer. My brother's gone through a bout. My uncle died. We have friends. So one of my law partners had a brain tumor. So we all know people. So now the next question is, how many people have a loved one or someone they're close to and know someone who has a substance abuse, drug, or alcohol problem? And you know what?
None or little.
It's us. It's the same people.
That's right.
And so, the idea that I don't know how old you are, I'm probably older than you, but in the late 60s and early 70s when we had there was a drug culture at that time. People used to look at people, society used to take a look at people who were taking heroin at that time as they were junkies.
Right.
And it was a back alley problem, and people would write those people off. And there's a number of things that have happened. Heroin has come roaring back. It was only like 30% pure back in the 60s and 70s. Now it's 70 plus, and it's cut with fentanyl and other drugs that would just knock your socks off. And so its susceptibility to overdose is very dangerous and high. And it's still the cheapest drug on the street. The same price was like $5 a bag back in the 60s and 70s. It's $5 a bag now, only it's twice plus stronger. And so, and pills get very expensive, and so people turn to the cheapest drug on the street, heroin. And then when you take a look at the chemical makeup of an opioid, of Percocet or Vicodin, and you lay it on top of the chemical makeup of the heroin, it's almost the same drug, and with minor variations. And then when they put fentanyl in it, then it's like premium, high test. And so we have a long way to go, but we're working hard. The Community Coalition here has been working with pharmacists, with the medical community, with families in crisis, with the schools. I mean, I think that's the only way we're going to beat this is through education and getting people involved and removing the stigmas. We all know someone who's had a problem. I mean, I saw my brother-in-law had a problem, drank himself to death in 53 years of age, and we have another close friend of ours had a son who had a skiing accident in college, and they gave him pain medication, and then they get out of school and they're trying to wean him off, and he was hooked on pain medication, turned to heroin, and it's good kids and good adults from good families that we're finding now, and let's not be fooled by that. It's a completely different dynamic. The average age of a person who died in 2014, I haven't done all because this is so new,
right,
so we're still running the numbers and we're only a week into the new year, but in 2014, the average age of a person who was dying of overdose was in the mid to late 30s, 75% male, 25% female. And I think the female numbers are up a little and the age is going down a little. But usually you just don't start out with a heroin problem. It's something that I think goes over a period of years.
Right.
And even if you may start with heroin, I never thought people just started out with heroin, but there's a little bit of that now going on. And so it's, I see a little bit of change. I used to say I live in a much more diverse community. When I grew up in Quincy, I had one Asian American in my class, Billy Fong, and that I still remember Billy, and I went to junior high and high school with him. And then I look at the community of Quincy today, and we're 25, 30%,
yes,
predominantly Chinese American. Now, one of the things that I have always been amazed at, and the state rep from Quincy is a kid named Taki Chan who worked for me for 12 years, and a great friend. And I said, I don't know what the Asian community is doing, but I didn't have an overdose death amongst the Asian community until last year. And I said, whatever the message, or however you deliver the message, is very, I got to figure it out and bottle that so we can make that work. But I can't tell you that the Asian community is not in the drug business and not selling and causing me problems. That would be untrue. But I think having good support and good family is where we're still going to beat this epidemic. It has to. People have to realize just how dangerous it is, and it's going to start at the dinner table. It's going to start talking to young kids, and it's going to start in the middle schools. And by the time you get to high school, you have to have gotten the message.
Well, I'm going to go to break and let some of our sponsors tell us about all the great things that they do. But I do want to come back and continue that, Mr. District Attorney. I want to talk about that. I want to, I'll try to weave into my own experiences, because even though we talk about the substance abuse issue, my overarching one is mental health generally. As I said, I'd like to talk about that and its impact on some of the work that your office does. And then we can continue chatting about all of the great good things that your office is doing here in all of the communities in which you serve here in Norfolk County. So we'll be back in a moment, but stay tuned.
Hi, it's Gary LaPierre, and the crew wants to thank Maxie's Delicatessen. That's at 117 Sharon Street in Stoughton. They're 781-341-1662. American Cancer Society, yes, they're looking for volunteers. Drive cancer patients to and from their treatments. 1-800-ACS-6662. or just go to www.cancer.org. Ilse Mark's Food Pantry in St. Anthony's Free Market, 2 Park Avenue in Stoughton. For more information, call Christine Gallagher. That's at 781-341-0611 or 781-341-0549. Meals on Wheels. Just ask for Jessica. You'll find her at 781-344-8882, extension 2. Stoughton Penny Saver. Our business is advertising your business, they tell us. 27 Rose Glen Street, Stoughton, 781-344-4833. Community Forum showtimes in Stoughton. It's Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday at 6 p.m., Monday at 8 p.m., Tuesday at 5 p.m. It's on Comcast Channel 9 and Verizon Channel 28. All comments and suggestions welcome. Contact us at communityforum1@yahoo.com. Community Forum showtimes in Easton. Mondays at 9 p.m., Tuesday at 8 a.m., Wednesdays 3 p.m., Saturday 10 a.m. And that too, Comcast Channel 9, Verizon Channel 22. Samaritans, they're at 41 West Street on the 4th floor in Boston, 02111. Their phone number is 617-536-2460. 24-hour helplines for Samaritans, and the number is 877-870-HOPE. That's 877-870-4673. Samaritans, you can find them at 800-252-TEEN. That's 252-8336. Or find them online at SamaritansHope.org.
And again, if you are a person who likes bingo, bingo is back. Bingo is every Monday night starting on January 11, 2016. The game starts at 6:30. It's at the Avatora congregation at 1179 Central Street. The doors open at 5 p.m. There are concessions that are available, and you have an opportunity to have door prizes, big money prizes, progressive jackpots, 50-50 and winner takes all, lottery tabs, and of course, gotta have the free stuff, the free cake, coffee, and tea. So come on out, have fun, see your friends and neighbors over at Avatar Congregation, 1179 Central Street. And if you need additional information, you can reach them at 781-344-8733. But remember, you can't bring any outside food or beverages. My guest today is the Norfolk District Attorney, or we say Norfolk County District Attorney, Michael W. Morrissey. And if you would like to contact his office, they're located at 45 Shawmut Road in Canton. Phone number is 781-830-4800, or you can look at the website, as I did earlier this morning, at www.norfolkda.com. Well, we're back. And viewing audience, I hope that you have learned and gotten a better insight into all of the work that the District Attorney's Office does. You know, it's a myriad of things, a myriad of problems, large community that as far as the footprint that you do cover, the types of cases. I was reading one thing, you get about 20,000 cases a year. Yeah, you know, you have 65 lawyers, 130 staff. You're trying to be a good citizen in the community by having the programs reaching out to address the issues that we are affected by, be it the drug situation, teenage issues, safe schools, animals, consumer protection, underage drinking, family violence. So, I mean, you are touching, I mean, you're touching all of the hot spots that we.
Sorry to say, I mean, it's. You know, you and I will talk about mental health in a minute, why we have the specialty courts. Now, there are certain segments of society who I think if we, I don't want to single them out because that adds in some respect, I want people to think that there's a stigma attached to them, but when we have veterans and we have a drug court and we have a mental health court, it's our way of saying, hey, let's put the resources behind the problems we identify that we want to deal with and pay special attention to try to get people the help and assistance they may need to be able to meet the challenges that they are facing and to stay out of the courts.
Well, that's a very progressive attitude, and I'm sure that there's not consistency across the country for sure,
No,
and I'm
no,
not going to
maybe
say
not
that's a
across the
consistency
Commonwealth,
within the
yeah.
Commonwealth. I just was
Yeah.
going to say that in terms of that thinking. So I applaud you personally, particularly on the issues that we've been chatting about today, but also the ones we were talking about off air, such as specifics in terms of mental illness and things of that nature. But before I go into the mental illness issue, I wanted to have us, if you would, talk about whether you're involved with the Safe Schools programs from the standpoint of, I guess I'll describe it as the intrusions that have been happening as far in the schools, as far as guns and shooters and things of that nature. Is your office involved with any of the training with that?
I think shortly after
attorney?
Newtown
Yes.
and some of the violence you see across the country. My father's a retired teacher. My sister teaches at Quincy High School. My wife is an administrator in the school system. And I think a lot of good work goes on in all of the schools. And ironically, in many cases, they spend more quality time with our children than even parents do, especially, depending on the family situation. So schools can be a very, very important resource. And keeping kids safe has to be a priority. And so we have actually been able to take some of the drug forfeiture money that we have, and as you talk about resources, well, we try to redirect the resources. They can be a little bit uneven because if we do have a good seizure of drugs and money, that's good, but you can't count on that every month or every year, so it's the highs and lows. But we've been able to, during the good years, to take some of that money and put it into a Safe School Summit, bring in national speakers, have an active shooting program going on. So the old days, I hate to ask you how old you are. Were you in school when they had the Big Red Scare? And they're talking about the atomic bomb, and it was duck and cover.
That's right.
Do you remember that?
In fact, I just read an article on that the other day, but yes, I was there.
Okay, you're going to throw me under the bus and say I am older, or you're going to say that you have to say the whole idea when we, Cuba and the Russia, and they're going to bomb us. We're going to get the atomic bomb, and it was duck and cover. And I can remember going to school in college in the '70s, having a poster that said, in case of atomic attack, seek a low-lying place, an area without any windows.
Or you had the signs with the yellow yellow sign with the black.
Yeah. Well, you still see the air raid shelters, and
Yep.
they used to have the old the rations and water and stuff. So, but they used to have at the end of that little poster I had when I was in college was, to take all the sharp objects out of your pocket, and then upon seeing a bright white flash, bend over, and then it says, put your head between your legs, and then the last one was, kiss you know it goodbye. And so it was, it was kind of a joke. So if that ever happened to us, well, school shooting, we took some of the money, and we had one school in every community come in, and we had people that are experts in handling security issues to develop a plan and a template which they could use in other schools. Like things you never think of is, okay, if something happened in Stoughton High School, okay, where is the safe zones? Where are we going to lock people in the schools if we have to lock them up? Do you escape, or do you lock your door? Are there locks on the door? How do you, it's some of the people in Columbine, I think, were killed in a library, and they could have got out
right to the door.
Right to the door, but they were told to stay in place and lock down. And so, while we don't endorse any particular program or answer, I think the question is to put it before the various school committees and the teachers and the groups, parents, that hey, there are some things that you should be talking about that may be beyond just lockdown. Lockdown is.
I read in a magazine, excuse me for cutting you off, just recently, I forgot which magazine it was, and there was an article speaking particularly to this, to what you're addressing right now, that a change in the thinking is a person who does began the conversation on this or wrote a book on this particular issue as to how to approach it, and that the hiding principle is not necessarily the best principle
it is one
to
principle.
be applied. That's right.
And but again, I need teachers to, like everything else. We used to like people who'd follow what we told them to follow. But there has to be some expression of free thinking. You got to be able to react to situations, and not just, the plan was to lock down, and they did what they were told.
Right.
And you'd applaud for people who did what they were told. But we're trying now to open up that conversation to think about locking down, have better communication in the schools. If the shooter is in the gym, then have someone announce the shooters in the gym area. That should at least give people an opportunity to get out the back door, away from the gym, if that's the case. But then one of the things that that the group that did the survey for me, they came in and they put aerials together, and if something were to happen, then the press is going to be on us like locusts. And so you need an area for the press to go.
Right.
You need an area where you can stage a emergency triage and get people the medical care. The roads to some of the schools in Newtown were blocked. They couldn't get emergency help in because all the parents are showing up today with cell phones and the video abilities and Facebook and everything else. Word spreads like wildfire. I mean, I remember my daughter she's a lawyer, took the bar exam, and most of my relatives knew ahead of me because she posted on Facebook, and I, so she called me up and told me she passed, and it passes. That's just the society, how they work today. So keeping kids safe has become a priority. We've taken some of that drug money and allowed communities in some case to rekey doors so they have a more a better lock system, better cameras on doors. Communication devices, upgrade their communications, having walkie-talkies, and then also having the experts come in and work with the police, the fire, and put together a plan. That there's a little booklet for most of these schools about if this, then that, and there's a playbook already there, so people should know where this is. Someone's going to set up the press, someone's going to handle the parents,
Right.
and just so that we have a more orderly plan. And I know that even the best laid, my father likes to say, the best laid plans of mice and men can go awry. But I think having a playbook is something that, if you even follow part of the playbook, you can save some of the confusion.
Well, if you don't plan, you plan to fail.
I would agree with that. And
so
it's one of the things I've said to people. You got to have a plan. And whether you can execute the plan, and that means, more training. And I think it means, you have to run some scenarios yourself. So that some of the school systems are doing a pretty good job.
It sounds like as I'm speaking to you, and I share some of your approach in that regard, that your thinking is broad, not myopic, in the sense that, it sounds like you've been able to engage the communities which make up Norfolk County in a lot of the activities that you were deem important. And that, again, is not something that's easily done,
well, no, but I think
for sure.
I think some of it hits you right in the face. Like Billy Keating saying to me, I had 40 people die when he was leaving. This is going to be a problem. I mean, when you see the unattended deaths and they're coming in, now it's 3 a week now of overdoses. I mean, you can't miss that, you know what I mean? And I think having been in the legislature and dealing with people and their problems served me well.
But I think that's your leadership. That's the point that I'm making, Mr. District Attorney, because what I'm saying is the fact there are a lot of places I reckon the problems exist, but the ability to get A and B together in order to address it is not possible.
That's a legislative function. I think I did learn a lot there. The other one is I started a law firm in 1986. It grew to, there was 30-odd attorneys, 60 people when I left. It was a good-sized law firm. They jokingly tell me I've had to give up my interest in that practice, and they tell me they're much more successful since I left. And so now there are over 50 attorneys, and when I left they practiced in predominantly Boston, they're in New Hampshire, and they're in Rhode Island. Now they're in Maine, Vermont, and they're down into Connecticut, and I think even White Plains, New York. So the firm has grown, and so I think that was the other part. I think having started a law firm with one guy and having it grow and having good teachers on how to run a business, my partners were not only good lawyers, but they were equally as good business people. I think that has helped me because I now run the largest law firm in the county. But I think having the social skills to deal with the problems that, as a legislator, and you were in A&F for years, so the large section of the budget that we saw in state government that was growing, and it's much larger since you and I have both been there. But I can remember the state budget when I first was there. And in the 70s, I think was like $7 billion. I think it went to 10, and everybody, oh my God! And now it's $35 billion.
That's right.
And a lot of those the high-end stuff. I mean, sure, debt service is still a problem, but and pension, other obligations are first line. But the human service side of the budget, the people that really have problems with society, if you don't spend some money on them, it's just going to cost you more money anyway. And if you do the right thing and we spend appropriately, like for instance, I think a lot of the crimes in Norfolk County are being committed by people with substance abuse-related problems.
Yes.
So if the breaking and enterings, the bank robberies. When was the last time, years ago, the FBI used to take all the bank robberies? Well, there's so many they can't keep up with it. So the local and state police are now working on the bank robberies. They used to be oftentimes tried in the federal courts. They're now tried in the state courts because people are going into these places and they're robbing them. Houses, house breaks, home invasions, cars, car thefts, assaults on people. A lot of it is driven by people that have substance abuse-related problems. So let's get to the problem to reduce the cases. I don't want to see them back, and they just keep coming back and coming back. You got to deal with the problem. Getting them help and assistance is the only way. I'm not going to see them back.
The other thing that I noticed, and again, I was in my conversations with various sheriffs, and I also want to come back to the District Attorneys Association, which I'm sure that you were involved with and may even have been in the leadership of at various times. But as my conversations with sheriffs, one of the areas whereby they too are beginning to look at this issue because they're forced to face the treatment of these individuals while they're incarcerated. And oftentimes that's the only place where many of their customers, as I will call them, are receive any type of treatment at all. And so there seems that everyone is recognizing, as you're saying, that you have to get at the root of the problem. And you have to continue because all you're going to do is be pushing it down the road.
Well, Sheriff Tompkins is probably a friend, and Sheriff Bellotti is someone in Norfolk County I've worked closely with. And one of the problems that we're running into is I used to say that the largest detox in Norfolk County is the House of Correction.
Yes.
And that's not a way to, it's a difficult way to deliver services to people. It does keep some people alive, I'll say that, but it's kind of a tough place to detox and get the support and the network you need. Now I know that re-entry is a big issue for all the sheriffs, and if we can send the right message to some of those people as they leave the prison system, and I know that the national government is pushing like Vivitrol and other drugs that will help control the for alcohol or drugs as one of the initiatives they're pushing. That alone is not the answer. It is an answer for some people, but it's not the only answer. So I think the sheriffs can play an important role as well. And so we work closely with the sheriff, and he's actually getting more involved with my community coalitions, and we have a prescription drug task force as well. So, we're dealing with the pharmacies and all aspects of the opiate. I mean, that's kind of consuming a lot of our time and resources, both in the district attorney's office and in the healthcare industry and in the mental health community, because I think a lot of people end up who have had substance abuse issues end up with depression and other related mental health illnesses.
Yeah, we call it in terms of co-occurrences is what we call it in the business, and in that, and maybe because we're having such a great time, we're running out of time, and I want to make sure we talk a little bit about the mental health pieces that we were speaking of, because as those co-occurrences, as they call it, where one may have a substance abuse as well as a mental illness diagnoses, while again, we're trying to talk about stigma and all of that, and being that I'm engaged in that community, I'm very much aware of that as you are. But the other thing that I guess I somewhat want to help educate folks on is trying to make the equation of mental health to violence, and that's such a misnomer of tying the two together that
it happens
dispel that.
It happens rare.
That's
think.
right.
And it's more. I think the people that are suffering from some form of mental illness or challenge usually end up in more stupid situations, I would say. The things that, we got to help them, right the ship a little, but they generally don't tend to be for the most part. And there's probably some exclusions, but, that they're not the most violent members of society. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I think it's a good group of people to work with, to be able to, incarcerating someone with a mental illness, what's that going to do for us? I mean, what kind of services does the Norfolk or Suffolk Sheriff has for someone with mental health issues? And the answer is about that much, little. And we're just trying to develop our own now, and by using outside resources. So having a mental health court and trying to teach some of the attorneys who work for me to try to steer the appropriate people to the mental health court, and you bring them under the bigger umbrella of getting some help and assistance.
In fact, you have some doctors that are working with you to provide that type of service as well. Is that correct?
We have doctors, clinicians, psychologists. Quincy District Court actually has a clinician assigned to it. It's so big; it's one of the largest courts, and we have a mental health clinician who they can call on daily. So I mean, that's available not in every court, but it's available in Quincy. And so we try to recognize those problems, and why punish someone for an illness, which. Now that gets back about the drug issue with people who are users and people who are sellers. The users need getting our attention. The sellers are going to go to jail. So then you get the gray area sometimes that people are selling to support their habit, and that gets a little bit harder. But the same thing. I mean, the bottom line is if somehow we can put together the whole family of resources, and if everybody, the defense bar and the plaintiffs work together, and I think that's one of the things about Norfolk County, which might be unlike a lot of other counties, is that we have enjoyed a great relationship over the years. I tell the people who work for me that having practiced law and been in politics for many years is that it's important how you treat people. Particularly lawyer to lawyer. I said you may end up, sending their client to jail, and that, that happens. But, we're all in this together, and you can still disagree without being disagreeable, and so. Remember that those relationships are important because they allow you to talk and to resolve issues which may, in the end, help everybody. It may help you from seeing the person again. It may help that person get the help and assistance they need. So I think that some people I hope the influence I have on them, that I leave them with that, is treat people how you want to be treated. Or as my father liked to say, remember the same people you see on the way up, you're going to see on the way down. And that's true in the courts.
Well, I think that's a good place in which because we're coming to the very few moments remaining in the program, but I really have appreciated what even I've learned about what your office does. I think even more importantly, to understand you as a person and an individual and your philosophy, which again, folks have the perception as to who the person who sits in this office is like, and I think that hopefully folks have learned that there is a human that sits there.
I am in Stoughton. I would say one of my community partners are your police and fire department. I know the fire chief just retired,
and you have him with you now.
Well, we're going to drag him along. Well, he's been a talent, and but your police department is really top notch. We like working with the chief. Your detectives, the sergeants have been most helpful. They've been leaders at Narcan. They work closely with us on drug-related issues, investigations. It's really one of the better departments that I think that we get to work with on a daily basis. So,
well, I think that we enjoy having you as the district attorney, District Attorney Morrissey. Thank you so much for being the first person to grace my program here on New Year. And
there's only one way to go, and that's up then.
Well, in terms of the thing is, and I hope that we'll be able to do this again when you have some other very important issues that you'd like to bring forward.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Have a good one.